Hi. Can people, I don't know if people can see me or hear me. Just a welcome. I'm Anne Nichols. I'm chair of the CIPR's Education Skills Sector Group. We're gonna wait for about 2 or 3 minutes while people are being let in. So just bear with me. And in about 2 minutes time, we'll start. I'm just going to ask Anna, who's letting people in, how we're doing.
We have 44 attendees at the moment.
Oh, brilliant. That's really good. Yeah. Because we've got over 100 registered now. We won't have everybody joining, but I mean, it's good, healthy numbers. So we'll start, 1 minute we'll start, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just people have just joined. We're going to start in 1 minute. I'm Anne Nichols. I'm chair of the Education and Skills Sector Group for the CIPR. Okay, I think we'll kick off now. Right, welcome everybody. As mentioned, I'm Anne Nichols, chair of the CIPR's Education and Skills Sector Group. This webinar will be recorded, so anybody that misses it can, or if you want to hear it again, watch it again, you can. It qualifies for 5 CPD points. I will be doing a write-up on our blog on LinkedIn afterwards. And Daryl Sperry, who's presenting, says he will make his slides available. If you've got questions, can you put them in the chat box? Because there will be time at the end to ask questions of Daryl. Right, just a little bit of intro why we've decided to do something on measurement and evaluation is it was one of the topics that it was the second most popular topic when we did a survey a year ago. The first topic was strategy. So we thought it was really important to do a webinar on this. And I know that a lot of people, particularly in the education sector, really struggle with demonstrating the impact of what they do. It seems to be a lot easier in digital marketing, but it's really tough to try and make a link between things like student recruitment or reputation and what we as PR professionals do. So I'm going to hand over now to Daryl Sperry. Sperry. And we were really, really thrilled to have Daryl here. He's top of his game in measurement and evaluation. He's the founder of an agency called Hard Numbers, which I'll just read out what he says. Hard Numbers marries killer creativity with commercial acumen to create campaigns that drive a demonstrable return on investment. His background is a little unusual in that it's mostly business development, working for media agencies and other commercial operations. He's a fellow of this PRCA and CIPR. But his most important job is father to his children. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to Daryl now.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Anne. I really appreciate it and delighted to have the opportunity to speak to everyone today about something that I really love. So you did an excellent introduction just now, Anne, so I'm not going to spend much more time on who. Bear with me one mo. I've just lost everyone. Hang on one sec. Apologies. One sec. There we go. And I'm going to share my screen again. There you go. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes.
It's right. Sorry about that. Great. Okay. So, yeah, great introduction just now, Anne. So I won't spend any time on that. So I'm going to talk to you about something that I'm incredibly passionate and enthusiastic about today. The thing, as Anne touched on the in the introduction just then, is the thing that I'm most enthusiastic about probably is my two kids. I am a dad to Halia and Hudson, and they are the most important thing to me in the world, and they are everything else is a distant second, but very close to my love for Halia and Hudson is my love for measurement and analytics. I am it has been the key part of my career, from having my own media intelligence business through to running sales and marketing for many years for Precise, now Inclusive, to then working in the digital marketing industry with MediaWorks, and then through to Hotwire, and now setting up my own agency, Hard Numbers. The through line to all of it has been looking to demonstrate successful ROI on investment in marketing and communications efforts, and that is what I'm going to talk to you about today. So I'm going to talk about why we measure. I'm going to talk about how to measure PR. I'm going to talk about what best practice is for measuring PR and communications efforts. And finally, I'm going to talk to you about what measures to use. And I understand this is a topic, as Anne touched on up top, which has seen an awful lot of interest from the education and skills sector group. So why measure in the first place? It wouldn't be a presentation from a PR, communications, or marketing professional without somewhere having Simon Sinek and starting with why somewhere in the presentation. So if anyone in the chat wants to suggest why we should measure PR, I'd be really interested in your thoughts for this. But here's 4 things that I think are kind of key to why we would measure PR. Firstly, is the effectiveness either of yourself as a PR professional practitioner, or your team if you're managing a team of people in-house, or the agency that you may be working with, or all of the above, right? From an internal performance management perspective, understanding how good either your in-house function or your agency is a key reason to invest in measurement and PR. To keep the CFO at bay is another suggestion, and that definitely does come into point 4 that I'm going to talk to you about very shortly. To evidence to leaders that we provide return on investment. Yep, that's one that I'm going to cover very shortly. 2, to show that I'm doing a good job for the organization. PR is competing with other marketing channels for budget all of the time and for the attention of the board or senior management. So if you're performing an in-house PR function, you want to be showing that you're doing a good job, and you want to show that PR is a channel that is worth investing time, effort, resources, and aligning to some of the comments in the chat, money towards. Thirdly, helping to gauge future potential performance. This is something that I think is less well understood or well used, or a kind of a less obvious benefit of measurement of PR. But if you have a historical benchmark for how things have performed, if you know when you've distributed particular press releases or announcements, and to what audiences, to what journalists, media outlets, etc., when, what they were about, all the rest of it, and then how much coverage was generated as a result of that activity as one thing. I know what we do isn't just issuing press releases, but just taking that as one example, then you have potentially the ability to benchmark future performance versus that, and to gauge what you might expect from your future PR and communications activities. Increasingly, in a world of dashboards and AI and predictive analytics and tools like that, I think this is going to become something that becomes more of a use case for measurement as well. And then finally, I think something that a lot of the comments in the chat have alighted on, demonstrating ROI on the activity to the board, or as someone very memorably said, to keep the CFO at bay. Ultimately, the board or senior management are investing money that could be spent somewhere else on PR and communications. So is this producing a return on investment in comparison to those other channels, and in and of itself? That's the key thing to bear in mind with measurement. So these are 4 pretty solid reasons for why we should measure, and I think everyone in the chat has I think that's covered off the areas that everyone else in the chat has talked about. So then we know the why, now we need to understand the how. So I'm going to run you very quickly through a history of measurement, which is then going to set up how we go about measuring in the world in which we are now. So I think the first phase of measurement started in the 1890s, in the early days of what used to be called press cutting services, in the days of Mr. Romeike and Mr. Curtis, and latterly Mr. Durrance, and really prevailed all the way through to the 1970s, which was basically focused on how much coverage, thud factor. Like if you were running PR communications for a higher education establishment at any point over that period of time, really measurement was how big is the pile of cuttings that you're taking into senior management at the end of every month or every quarter, as a demonstration of how much work you've done on behalf, communicating the benefits of that organization externally. Then in the 1980s through to the 2000s, you moved into the period of content analysis. So there was more rigorous analysis of outputs, so of the coverage that was secured as a result of campaigns. But at that point, linking them to outcomes, what has happened as a result of this, was still quite hard and still relied on brand tracking surveys, econometric modeling, things like that, that cost an awful lot of money, usually more money than was being spent on PR by most organizations, so they didn't do it. And then from the 2000s, as a result of digital technology, we moved into the kind of link to outcomes phase of measurement. So digital overall enables us to much more cost effectively link activity and output, so our work to generate media coverage and the media coverage we secure, to outcomes, what happened as a result. So basically, things like being able to include a link to coverage that's published online, and then be able to track referral traffic from that link to the organization's website, as one example in microcosm, is a way of demonstrating that link between outputs and outcomes. So the measures that lots of people will be familiar with, that hail back as far as the last, deep into the last century: volume of coverage, how much coverage have we secured, the cumulative reach of that coverage, so sometimes called impressions, circulation, opportunities to see, things like that interchangeably. They do actually mean different things, but ultimately it's how many people potentially had the opportunity to see that coverage. Advertising value equivalency, or AVE, is something largely discredited. I will come back to this in a moment. It is still provided by most of the tier 1 media monitoring services, if any of you use Onclusive or Romeike or services like that. But it's largely a discredited measure. And the reason those organizations provide it is simply that they have the dimensions of the article, they have the advertising page rate in their database. It's a very easy metric for them to calculate and provide automatically as part of their media monitoring service. AVE has seen a resurgence under the term EMV, or earned media value elsewhere, all means the same thing. And then volume of coverage in tiered publications. So you might all have tier 1 publications like national outlets, or tier 1 educational outlets, things like that, that you think are most widely read by your target audience or have the greatest reach. So the volume of coverage you have within those tiered publications would be how you would go about measuring in that period of time. Fast forward to the content analysis phase, and again, these are measures that you will, I'm sure, be familiar with. Sentiment of media coverage, how much of coverage was positive or negative about the organizations that we represent. Message pickup, were our key messages included within the coverage. Topic or issue analysis, so is there a key issue or something that the organization wants to be communicating about or needs to be communicating about, and is that present within the coverage? And then share of voice versus competitors. How much coverage did we secure in comparison to our competitors? All of those are, with the exception of the final one, are basically just analyzing the media content, the output, in more depth. They're not then linking that in any way to outcomes. And share of voice doesn't have a link to outcome either, but it's looking not just at the coverage you secured, but also the coverage that your competitors or peers or whoever secured as well. And then finally, we move into the link to outcomes phase, which is more about the digital side of things that I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail shortly, because I think that is where the most interesting measures of things can be found. So PR measurement best practice. I'm going to talk about a couple of things here. In particular, you're going to hear me say AMEC, the Association for Measurement and Evaluation of Communication, quite a lot. There's 2 key resources that they've made available for PR and communications professionals that I think are really, really worth your time investing in, understanding and using more. So the first one is the Barcelona Principles. So this was basically, AMEC holds an annual summit. This year it's taking place in Vienna, and I'm going to be speaking at the summit in Vienna this year. I was at the conference in Barcelona where the Barcelona Principles were discussed and agreed upon, and have been the kind of foundation of best practice for measurement and evaluation of communication ever since. I've linked to the latest version of the Barcelona Principles within this presentation. Very happy to share this presentation with everyone afterwards by way of following up. But basically, the Barcelona Principles have a number of key tenets that they say are best practice for measurement and evaluation of communication. That you set a clear goal, right, before you start anything. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment as it relates to the integrated measurement framework. But that kind of cuts across just about anything in life, really, right? Like, if you understand what your goal or objective is, then making sure that everything you do subsequently, in terms of the activities that you do, the outputs that you create, and how you then measure the effectiveness, all tie back to that goal. So having in mind a clear goal and having clear goals that are understood and widely agreed upon by everyone is the building blocks of successful measurement and evaluation. Measurement and evaluation should identify outputs, outcomes, and impact. So outputs are what we create as a result of our activity. So very often media coverage, but not only. So if we're creating a microsite on our organization's website to target a particular audience or make particular resources available, or if we're putting on an event that we invite stakeholders to, or if anything that we do, those are basically outputs that are created as a result of our activity. So that's outputs. Outcomes is what happens as a result. And so that can be things like an increase in brand awareness, an increase in signups for something that can be in the B2B world, that is, leads or things like that. That can be perception change with your key target audience of stakeholders, things like that. Whatever the those are ultimately the outcomes, and then potential impact is what impact that's had on the organizations that we're representing. So overall, have we been able to improve the number of sign-ups, for example, for particular courses or things like that for the organization? And can we demonstrate that as a result of our activity? Outcomes should be identified for stakeholders, society, and the organization. So I will, because I'm primarily in the B2B world, I will probably over-index a little bit on talking about leads and revenue and all of those kinds of things when I talk about stuff. But particularly when you think about educational organizations, there are a broader range of stakeholders than just students that are signing up for courses. You've obviously got faculty, you've got the wider business and regional environments in which you're working with. You have a broader range of stakeholders that you need to be engaging with at a national, local, regional level that you need to be thinking about. So you should be thinking about outcomes and impact to those different audiences, not just to one specific audiences. That qualitative and quantitative analysis is possible. So you're analyzing things qualitatively, talking about, as we did earlier, positive or negative, and those other kind of qualitative measurements, as well as quantitative assessments of success, volume, reach, opportunities to see, etc. AVE is not the value of communication. I will share afterwards with Anne, and she can share with the group, a brilliant article that was written by Richard Bagnall on this very topic. But basically, there are myriad reasons why advertising value equivalency, or AVEs, are not a good measure of communication. Broadly, you can boil that down to, yes, they give you a big number, but they don't take into account qualitative measures of success. So you could be dealing with a crisis for the organization whereby the college or university or the organization you're represented in is talked about an awful lot in a negative way. But if you just looked at AVE, you would obviously just see you would think that is a positive. Right? Oh, we generated an advertising value equivalency. If we'd have bought the coverage in the publications, it would have cost us 12 million quid. Yeah, but if it's all negative, then that's not particularly helpful and not helping you achieve your objectives. Also, it's not an accurate measure because no one ever buys rate card. So it gives you a big number, but actually it's not it's not how advertising works typically. Also, it rarely takes into account the presence of your competitors. So it just takes into account the whole size of the article. So if your competitors were written about more within a particular piece of coverage than you were, all of that context is missed. There's myriad other reasons why AVE is not a good measure for communication, but basically the fact it's divorced from any qualitative assessment of the coverage is really important, and the fact that ultimately it isn't robust in terms of the numbers, the data that informs it, are all reasons why it's not a good idea to be reliant on a data point like that. Holistic communication measurement and evaluation includes all relevant online and offline channels. So this is an area which is difficult for hard stretched budgets to cover, because really if you're looking to measure completely the impact that you've had, you would want to be able to measure broadcast coverage, online coverage, offline coverage, print coverage, all that stuff, all in the same place and in a similar way. I recognize that is challenging for stretched communications budgets. So you're then reliant on your ability to get that coverage in some way or another via free-to-air channels like Google News and things like that, and the publications themselves. And then communication, measurement, and evaluation are rooted in integrity and transparency, ethics. Basically, we all, as members of the CIPR, I'm a chartered practitioner myself, know the importance of ethics, and particularly when you're measuring and reporting back on communications, that's important. So those are the basic tenets of the Barcelona Principles. This is the AMEC integrated measurement framework. I joke all the time that every member of the Hard Numbers team has this tattooed somewhere on their body. I have it on my inner thigh. It is the most important, I think, measurement framework that you can use. A lot of this we've already covered. I've put links in the document here, but basically we start with the objectives. Well, just quickly, actually, if you go to the integrated framework website, this is a live document, and you can basically put in your objectives, you can put in the inputs you need, etc., to help you map out basically what your measurement framework is for a particular campaign or particular communications activity. So to take you through this really quickly, some of this we've already covered, but firstly, objectives. What is it ultimately that we're trying to achieve here? I think that is, as we saw from the analysis that we did from the Barcelona Principles, having clear goals and objectives agreed across the organization beforehand is the foundational principle of good measurement. If we know what we're trying to achieve, we can then work on how we're going to measure it. Inputs is, for us to be successful, what do we need to know about the organizations, about the audiences that we're trying to communicate with, about what influences them and how we might go about influencing them. What do we need to know? What are the messages we're trying to communicate, etc.? All the things we need to know, those are the inputs. The activities are what we're going to do. So that can be, we touched upon it earlier, of course, that can be writing a press release and distributing it to key media, but PR communications is so much more than that. It could be events, it could be content we're creating for the website, it could be campaigns that we're running, it could be on campus, off campus, there could be loads and loads of things that we could be doing potentially. Those are the activities. The outputs are what ultimately is going to be created as a result of those activities. And the outtakes is then, what do we want our audience to think as a result? So very often, that can be related to a brand awareness, which you can benchmark versus your competitors or peer organizations, for example. That can be key messages that we want the audience to think. That can be promoting specific faculties or courses or things like that within the organization. There could be policy outtakes as well if we're engaging with a broader range of stakeholders ultimately. But outtakes is what we want people to think as a result of this activity. And then outcomes is ultimately what happens. How have we increased the audience's understanding, awareness, understanding, or preference for our organization versus others? Potentially, how has it changed attitudes or understanding, more broadly? What ultimately has it led to? What are the outcomes that it's driven? And then impact is how is that on the overall organizational objectives that we're trying to achieve? If you're working for higher education organizations that are trying to increase intake and drive up numbers of new students each year, for example, then how has your activities helped contribute to that? If there are particular faculties that you're looking to demonstrate a specialism or real expertise or really be known for, particular courses or faculties or whatever externally, how have the activities that you've undertaken and the outputs that you've created, etc., ultimately driven towards that? So that's that organizational impact piece. So what measures to use? this is where I'm going to over-index on some of the kind of digital stuff that I talked about earlier, but I think it's important stuff, because my understanding of the brief that I was given for Anne is a lot of folks on this call are dealing with very stretched budgets. So you don't want me turning up on here saying, well, you need to be doing econometric modeling and, you know, brand tracking surveying and, you know, all this kind of stuff, which costs an awful lot of money. So the things that I'm going to talk to you about here are like free, basically. So analytics, it is non-negotiable that for you as professional communicators representing an organization, right, don't have access to Google Analytics. You have to have access to Google Analytics. It's a non-negotiable. You need to be given access to it. So if any of you don't have access to it, that is absolutely something that you need to have access to. And then you need to invest. You know, I've got good news for you. I've got bad news for you, right? I've got the good news is everything I'm going to talk about is free. The bad news is it takes your time, right? Because you're going to have to learn and upskill yourselves on some of these areas if you don't currently understand this. There are loads of brilliant LinkedIn learning, completely free training sessions and things out there in relation to this stuff. When I left Hotwire and I set up Hard Numbers, I was in a fortunate position, admittedly, of having some gardening leave for a period of time. And in a week, I taught myself how to use Google Data Studio completely from scratch. Never used it before in my life, had never used anything like that. And over the course of a week, I got to the point where I could build myself a Google Data Studio dashboard that brought in data from multiple different data sources, a Google Sheet, Google Analytics, and Google Search Console. I promise you, I am no more intelligent or no more able or no more able to do anything digitally than anyone else on this call. So if I can do it, you can do it. And if you just carve out the time to learn and upskill yourselves on things like analytics, Search Console, things like that, you will be much better at measuring the outcomes of and your organizational impact as a result. So analytics is basically gives you the measures of how much traffic is coming to your organization's website and where it's coming from and at what time of day and where it's coming from in terms of channel, but also where it's coming from in terms of geography. Google Search Console is another Google tool, but what it's brilliant for is giving you the ability to see how much traffic is coming to our website via what you'd call branded search. So how many people are searching for Bournemouth University or University of Bournemouth or Bournemouth Uni or BOMO Uni or, you know, things like that, and then coming to the traffic, coming to the Bournemouth website as a result. That number of people that are searching for those terms gives me an overall understanding of the brand awareness of Bournemouth University, right? Because I know how many people are searching for it each month. I've then got a benchmark. I can then track that on a monthly basis to say, am I seeing as a result of my activities an increase in the number of people that are searching for all those different variants of Bournemouth University every month, right? If I am, then I'm having an impact on brand awareness, right? Now, obviously, we all know that the educational industry is seasonal. So you would want to be building seasonal benchmarks into that. And you would also be wanting to benchmark your competitors against that. Another, again, completely free tool that would enable you to do that is Google Trends. So basically put your organization and then 4 other organizations into Google Trends, filter it to UK or any other markets that you want to be driving brand awareness in, and filter it over the period of time that you want to look at. And then that gives you a benchmark of your brand awareness versus your peers. So those are all completely free ways of doing that kind of measurement. Then CRM. Does your organization have some form of CRM system and do you have access to it? Again, non-negotiable. You need to have access to that kind of stuff because you are communicating ultimately on behalf of the organization with these audiences. The student audience is an incredibly important audience for you to be communicating with. So having access to CRM, HubSpot, Salesforce, those are the big ones. Zoho, that are most widely used in the educational sphere. having access to the CRM and then seeing where potential expressions of interest in courses or things like that come from is important. And finally, surveys. It is expensive to run your own surveys with a third-party surveying organization, much less so if the organization is already running some form of survey with a group of key stakeholders. Can you add a couple of questions to it? And it's very often the case that we find out that within organizations, someone somewhere is running like some form of survey. Can we just add a couple of questions to it that relate specifically to PR? Alternatively, if you have a CRM system, you have a database of email addresses of people that you're interested in communicating with, a good simple Google survey to that audience is super helpful. So here are some potential measures of success that I hope are helpful. So one, people talk a lot in the PR industry about brand awareness, right? I'm always a little bit, I always challenge anyone who tells me that an objective for an activity, a PR communications activity, is brand awareness. And the reason why I'll question it is, well, can you tell me what your level of brand awareness is today and what your level of brand awareness was 12 months ago? And can you tell me how you intend to measure brand awareness over the course of the activities that we're going to be undertaking with one another? And if the answer to all those questions is no, maybe then there isn't an effective benchmark externally to benchmark. So how do you know you've been successful? So what I would encourage you to do, if the brief you have been given by the organization is brand awareness, so that's the goal, well, you have to have a measure for it. And it has to be a consistent measure that you're measuring on a regular basis that enables you to see, have you affected change? And ideally, can you go back and look historically as well? So I would say, if you want to measure brand awareness, looking at Google Search Console and seeing the volume of branded search that is coming to your website each month is one way of doing that. You could also use Google's ad tools to look at the volume of branded search in relation to your organization versus competitor or peer organizations. So what's the total number of people that are searching on Google for our organization? How many people are searching for competitor or peer organizations? That then gives you your monthly level of kind of brand awareness, both in and of yourself, and then that you can benchmark versus your peers. Another way, which is annoyingly less effective than it used to be, is a volume of unprompted mentions on social media like X or Twitter. There was a point in time where Twitter, as it was then, was the public square. It was, widely used by a whole range of different people, and being able to measure unprompted mentions on that channel was a pretty good proxy for brand awareness. I would contend that it is less useful now as a result of myriad things that have changed since Elon Musk's ownership. But it is another free way of seeing, relative brand awareness. And then surveying of your target audience. If you're already doing some form of survey, or if you can do a Google survey to your cohort of people that you have on your CRM system, that's definitely a way that you can go about measuring your brand awareness, and again benchmarking that on a regular basis. If you're doing surveys, I would say quarterly rather than monthly is probably the right cadence, maybe 6 monthly. Means that you see a longer time to results, but those kinds of things don't change greatly over time, and you don't want to be going to the same cohort of people regularly asking them to fill in the survey, because you'll get survey fatigue. Thought leadership. So ultimately, that's driving the profile of the organization by leveraging the domain knowledge within it, right? I hope everyone would agree that that's a serviceable definition of thought leadership. So looking for increased volume of coverage for either key spokespeople or key people within faculty that you want to be promoting externally as domain experts in areas that you want to be demonstrating that expertise externally. How many op-eds or byline pieces of coverage have you secured for them each month? Those are ways that we could do that. If we're looking to profile these folks as well, another brilliant channel for doing that is obviously LinkedIn, and then measuring their LinkedIn audience. How many followers or connections have they got over time, and is that increasing as a result of the activity that you're working with them on to do? The other key thing to do there, obviously, is as and when you secure earned media coverage for key spokespeople or key domain experts within the organization, help them merchandise that coverage on LinkedIn. I know it's a pain. Ghostwrite LinkedIn post for them, share it with them and say, can you post this to your LinkedIn channel, right? LinkedIn is primarily a thought leadership channel. You will see yourselves when you scroll through your LinkedIn feed each day, more than 60% of the content you see is from people, not corporate accounts. You will win on LinkedIn as a channel in terms of your reach, etc., by profiling people rather than investing as much time and effort as you are in the main corporate accounts. And you'll see that time and again. And then finally, commercial contribution to commercial outcomes, sign-ups, expressions of interest, etc. So referral traffic, as measured from Google Analytics, to your organization's website from third-party websites. So if you secure coverage on a editorial website and it has a link in it, you can then track the referral traffic that's happened as a result. You can track top sources of referral traffic to your site as well. You can look at traffic and on-page events on target landing pages, on pages that you may have created to support campaigns or other communications activities on your organization's website, and that's all done via Google Analytics. Then obviously leads or new contacts created within your organization's CRM, again, which could be attributed back to your PR activities. But you could also abstract based on time, as in when, if you show there's an appreciable increase in the number of leads or expressions of interest that correlates with the time that you were running a campaign, then that's I would say that's correlation and causation potentially, and you should be able to lay claim to some of that, even if the CRM doesn't have all of the data you would want around lead source and things like that. So putting it into practice, I'm afraid I don't have a educational example that I can talk you through, but I do have an example from a client that we worked with, HighSpot. They are a what's called a sales enablement platform. It sits on top of a CRM system and enables sales and marketing teams to better collaborate with one another in terms of creating content, sharing content with their prospective clients, and then seeing how much of that is viewed, open, things like that. The key that we probably all know instinctively is that salespeople very often talk a different language to marketing people and have different expectations and different measures of success and things like that. So we did this report. It was the first of its kind on the state of sales and marketing alignment between those two audiences. We researched the perspectives of sales folks and marketing folks, how confident they were in hitting their quota in that quarter and for the rest of the year, and a whole range of other stuff. And then we used those insights to create this sales enablement report that we did in the UK, France, and Germany. And as a result, we generated 67 pieces of media coverage. We had to, in terms of inbound responses that cited the campaign, over 950 inbound responses as a result of that. So people who expressed interest in HighSpot and said they saw HighSpot as a result of this particular campaign. We generated on the landing page for the report where users could go and then put in their username, their name, their organization, their email address, etc. Gated page. We generated 142 marketing qualified leads from that activity. And then as a result of HighSpot's CRM, we were able to see that they had £224,000 worth of one client's new business that this report had at some point been a touch point So a salesperson had shared this with their prospect at some point during that the sales process, or someone had downloaded this report and then expressed interest in HighSpot and become an opportunity within their CRM, etc., etc. But those are all ways in which we were able to measure the impact of the work that we did. This won an AMEC Gold Award the year after we put it out. So hopefully that demonstrates we did something right. Are there any questions from anyone about anything that I have or I haven't covered there? Please feel free to share it in the chat.
I've got a couple of questions, but I'll let other people go before me. There's something in the chat.
About what's the CRM system? I'm sorry, I didn't cover that off particularly well up front.
Yeah.
The CRM system is a customer relationship management software. It's largely all web-based software nowadays, whereby organizations can record all of the information about their prospective customers or stakeholders or anything in one centralized database. So you have the name, contact details, email address, etc., and then a record of your engagement with that person over time. The most widely used globally is Salesforce, but then there's other ones like HubSpot, Zoho, other CRM systems like that out there. I have done a presentation on CRM for universities that, again, for the Knowledge Transfer Partnership. I'll be very happy to share that with Anne if that's a useful primer for CRM systems. But I'm finding more and more higher education institutions are using CRM systems like those now. If anything, one of the biggest problems is multiple different departments or functions within higher education platforms having access to different using different CRM systems, and that's obviously not ideal. You want to have one source of truth, one central database that everyone then has access to.
Okay, shall I go with my question? I mean, there's one hit earlier about the difference between are measures 1 and 2 different? That was way back in one of your earlier slides. Yeah.
I suppose no, in that that's two different things, right? One is measuring the effectiveness of your team or agency. The other one is measuring effectiveness of yourself, and also obviously benchmarking versus other particular marketing or communications channels that might exist within the organization. If that's helpful.
Yeah. Okay, but my question is, and this really applies to freelancers or organizations that haven't quite got their act together. I mean, I've found that I might be doing a media relations campaign for somebody, and the client is just not prepared to either benchmark from the beginning, you know, what their objectives are, or they haven't really got the capacity to do Google Analytics or search. So at the end of the project, you know, you're left with not knowing what the impact has been, and it's very difficult then to go to a new client and say, well, it had all this impact and blah blah blah, because that particular organisation didn't really have the time to do any measurement. I don't know if that's something that's typical or other organizations have found.
I mean, I suppose my sort of argument with that is you wouldn't take your car to a mechanic and say, I want you to fix my car, but I won't open the bonnet to let you see the engine underneath, right? Like, you know, as far as I'm concerned, there are no clients that we work with, no matter what size, that we are not given access to their Google Analytics, you know, for working with them. Because if we don't have access to analytics, we can't do all of the things that we need to do, and we can't, exactly to your point, measure the effectiveness of what we're doing in anywhere near the level of depth that we would otherwise do. Not to mix my metaphors, but it is like sending someone into a boxing match in time when I'm behind their back if you don't give them access to analytics. And we say to, we have walked from clients that will pay us money because either for all things in relation to this, if you don't give us access to this stuff, we can't do our job. So I think I would see it as a non-negotiable. But that's a double-edged sword, right? It's also non-negotiable for us as communications professionals to say that I can't use Google Analytics, right? Like we have to be able to. Like it's because there are plenty of tools out there, free Data Studio dashboards that give you the analytics on analytics, so that you can see the data really quickly and easily. There are loads and loads of free training courses on LinkedIn Learning and things like that, all around analytics. I've done them personally to get myself the user level I have now. I would encourage anyone to do the same thing. There are loads of tutorials as well on YouTube. YouTube is an amazing, again, completely free resource for learning about how to use all this stuff. But analytics gives you the ability to see where traffic to the organization's websites come from, and if you add it to Google Search Console, what have they searched in terms of to then find the organization's website? What have they done as a result? Where have they come from geographically? Increasingly, we all know in the university sector, overseas students pay full freight. We want to drive more and more overseas students elsewhere. How are we having an impact on driving interest, awareness, interest, traffic from international markets? The only way that we're going to do that in anything like a cost-effective fashion is to be able to see that via analytics.
Okay, time for one more question, and then I'll do a summing up. And I mean, what would be really good would be to hear what people's experiences are. I mean, if anybody's got an experience to share. So, one more question. Do put it in the chat box, because we'll be finishing in a minute. Anything else?
I mean, and while we're waiting for someone to post, just to quickly say, one area that is quite an operational question, but how can we guide senior leaders away from being AVE obsessed? We get asked this. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I will share with Anne following this the article that Richard Bagnall wrote on this, which is basically why you shouldn't use AVEs. But basically, it's a simulacrum of data. It isn't actually data because it doesn't have any of the qualitative measures within it, right? And because it isn't accurate in terms of the input which is going into it, which is the ad rate that goes into it, it's never going to give you an accurate way of measuring the impact that you've had at all. So I think, but I'll share that with the group, and very hope that is in some way helpful.
Yeah.
How do you work out what specific goals you want to achieve? In HE, I worked backwards from how many applications I needed to achieve, and roughly working out when it had 8x hits, I needed X applications, so I needed 12x to get to the number I needed. Is there a better way? Lauren, I think that's from Lauren Thomas. I think that's brilliant. You would do the same thing in sales or marketing, right? You would basically work back from your target, and then you would use your conversion rate at each point in the funnel to then say, okay, well, if my conversion rate of traffic to a particular target landing page to expression of interest is 50%, I mean that's unusually high, but you get my point. Then basically I need double the number of sign-ups in terms of traffic to landing pages to then give me the number that I get. So yeah, and then work that all the way back up through the through the funnel. That's a really smart way of doing it. If you can benchmark what your conversion rate is at each step, and that doesn't just have to be digital, that can be number of people that are invited to an open day to their number of people that sign up, for example, then that gives you that conversion rate that you can then calculate back to, well, that's how many people I need to invite to an open day. So yeah, absolutely, that's the right way of going about calculating something like that. Think it's really smart. Do we have a
questions?
guide? Yeah. Do we have a guide or restriction on number of metrics we should be measuring? Regular discussion with leaders about useful data. Yeah. So I would say two things here. Personally, for you, I would measure as many data points as you could possibly get your hands on, right? Because you will always find one graph which is growing, which is going up and to the right, as a result. So we will always, for our clients, measure as many different things as we possibly can, because, okay, maybe if all we did was measure cumulative reach of the coverage that we'd secured, right? If we were getting our clients like much better quality coverage in very specific vertical trade titles that really reach the target audience that they were trying to reach more regularly and consistently, if we were optimizing for reach, we would go after other outlets like nationals or MSN or things like that that might not actually reach the specific target audience that they were going for. So if all we looked at was reach, we'd be doing ourselves a disservice in terms of the measurement that we were doing. So for you personally, have as many measures as you can possibly get. For the organization, focus on the ones that you can actually influence in some way or another, and B, that matter to the organization. What is it that the organization wants, and what do you potentially have control over, positively having an impact on? And those are the ones that I would focus on there. But in the instances whereby, and I think there's a difference between targets and KPIs. Targets are ultimately that alignment between the organization and the objectives and what you can do, what you can influence. KPIs are the things that you're going to be doing that are all going to ultimately be pointing towards that, because you might not hit your target in one given month, but you might have hit your KPIs, and that tells you an interesting and useful story internally, and also enables you to show the organization you're still doing everything you can, but there might be other macro factors at play, and we all know about some of the challenges that exist in the higher education space currently. Yes, so Xian, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. Use GA quite a bit, but it's a lot harder post GA4. You're 100% right, and that is why I would look for. There are a number of free Data Studio tools that enable you to basically visualize GA4 in exactly the same way as you used to with Google Analytics, and it makes it much easier to use. But there are some really, really good tutorials available there. You're 100% right, though. GA4 is much harder to use than previous versions of Google Analytics. I think it's because they want you to consume Google Analytics data via platforms like Data Studio rather than doing it natively on their own platform. In part because you can do more in Data Studio, in part because it means they have less, overhead to kind of maintain there.
I think we are done.
Cool. I think we're done. All right.
We're done. No big. Yeah. Do you want to say? I'm just going to do a summing up in a minute. Anything you want to say, Dale?
No, just thank you everyone for your time. I really hope that was helpful, and I didn't say Google too frequently.
Yes. No. My takeaways are clear goals. You must have clear goals before you start. AVAs are basically dead in the water, so don't use them anymore. Make sure you use the AMEC framework, and there's a course you can do. I've just started doing it actually. It's the AMEC Foundation in Media Measurement and Evaluation Certificate. So it's certainly worth going on their website and having a look at that. Make sure you're clear on outputs, outtakes, outcomes, and impact, and use all the tools in Google. Just spend some time getting familiar with them. and also on LinkedIn Learning. So I think that's it, lots there. I'll be doing a write-up for LinkedIn, and I will check it back with you, Daryl, make sure I get everything right. But I mean, big thanks to Daryl. That has been so helpful. And I hope we've all got something out of it. So thank you for attending. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much then.
Thank you.